My Weird School, Book number 15, Mr. Macky is Wacky, written by Dan Gutman, pictures by Jim Pallot. Chapter 5, George Washington's Face. We were having fun learning about our crazy pets, but guess who suddenly walked into the door? Nobody, because if you walked into a door, you would hurt your head. But guess who walked into the class? It was some funny-looking guy, all dressed up in a fancy army uniform. He had a wig on his head and a sword in his hand. "It's George Washington," said Miss Daisy, all excited. She stood up and gave him a salute. We all knew it wasn't George Washington. It was just Mrs. Rupee, our librarian. She is always pretending to be somebody else. One time, she pretended to be Johnny Appleseed, and she walked around all day with a pot on her head. I still don't understand why you have to wear a pot on your head to plant apples. Mrs. Rupee is loopy. "You're not George Washington," we all shouted. "You're Mrs. Rupee, the librarian." "You must be mistaken," Mrs. Rupee said in a fake low voice. "I was the first president of the United States. I cannot tell a lie. I chopped down a cherry tree. I have wooden teeth. See?" Mrs. Rupee took out her teeth. It was disgusting. I was glad when she put those gross teeth back in her mouth. "I came to tell everyone that when you come to the library, you'll find lots of books about me and the other presidents, too," said Mrs. Rupee. "They'll help you prepare for your President's Day oral reports. I wish I could hang around and tell you more, but I must go fight the British." She ran out of the room. "That was totally Mrs. Rupee," said Ryan. After Mrs. Rupee left, Miss Daisy asked, "Who can tell us something about the real George Washington?" "His face is on the dollar bill," said little Miss See How Smart I Am Andrea. "That's right," said Miss Daisy. Andrea looked all proud of herself. "He should take that dollar bill off his face," I said. "No, I mean his face is on the dollar bill." I knew perfectly well what Andrea meant. I was just yanking her chain. "How could George Washington fight the British with that dollar bill on his face?" I asked. "Yeah," Michael said. "Why didn't he just carry the dollar bill in his wallet like a normal person?" "Enough chit-chat," Daisy told us. "Let's read a book by my favorite author, Dr. Seuss." She read us a story called Yertle the Turtle. It was pretty cool. But I still say George Washington was weird. Chapter 6, It's Hard to be the President. The next day, Mr. Macky popped his head in our class right after the morning announcements. "Are you all getting excited about President's Day?" he asked. "Yeah," said all the girls. "No," said all the boys. "I have a question for you," Mr. Macky said. "What color is the White House?" Everybody waved their hands around in the air. Even the dumbest dumbbell in the world knows the White House is white. That's why they call it the White House. Duh! But Mr. Macky didn't call on any of us. Instead, he called on Miss Daisy, who was waving her hand just like she was a kid. "The White House is blue, right?" said Miss Daisy. I slapped my head. She doesn't know anything. "The White House is white!" we all shouted. "Oh," said Miss Daisy. Thought it was a trick question. Miss Daisy is crazy. She's the dumbest teacher in the history of the world. "To what do we owe the pleasure of your company, Mr. Macky?" asked Miss Daisy. "That's grown-up talk for, what are you doing here?" "I thought I would tell the students a little bit about the presidents," said Mr. Macky. "It might help them decide which president to choose for their oral reports." "Excellent idea," Miss Daisy said as Mr. Macky went running out of the room. "Where did he go?" asked Ryan. Who knows? I said. He's weird. Mr. Macky came right back in, but this time he was walking on his knees, and he had his shoes over his knees, so it looked like he was really tiny. I'm James Madison, Mr. Macky said. I am the 4th president and the shortest. I'm about 5 feet 4 inches tall, and I only weigh 100 pounds. What a shrimp, Ryan said. Mr. Macky excused himself and ran out of the room again. Then he came back with a cigar in each hand, a cigar in his mouth, and 2 cigars sticking out of his ears. Who are you now? Asked Andrea. I'm Ulysses S. Grant, Mr. Macky said. The 18th president. I smoke 20 cigars a day. That's disgusting, said Michael. Mr. Macky ran out of the room again. He must have stuffed a bunch of pillows under his shirt, because when he came back in, he was really fat. Nobody can gain weight that fast. Who are you now? Asked Emily. I'm William Howard Taft, he said. The 27th president. I weigh more than 300 pounds. I had a special bathtub built for me in the White House. You should go on Weight Watchers, I said. My mom lost 20 pounds that way. Mr. Macky ran out of the room again. When he came back this time, he was wearing a dress. Who are you now? Asked Ryan. I'm Franklin D. Roosevelt, he said, the 32nd president. My mother made me wear a dress until I was 5 years old. Your mother was weird, I said. Mr. Macky ran out of the room again. When he came back, he wasn't wearing any clothes at all. He just had a towel wrapped around him. Who are you now? Asked Michael. I'm John Quincy Adams, the 6th president. I like to go skinny dipping in the Potomac River near the White House. You're really weird, I said. Mr. Macky kept running in and out of the room over and over again. Each time he came back, he was dressed up like a different president. Jefferson, Reagan, Kennedy, Jackson. It went on and on and on. We learned a lot of important stuff about the presidents, like which one grew the first tomatoes in America, Jefferson, and which one was a member of the Beatles, Harrison. Most of them were weird. Did you know that Andrew Johnson, the 17th president, never went to school? It's true. He didn't even learn to read until he was 17 years old. See? That just proves that any dumbhead can grow up to be president. Finally, Mr. Macky stopped running in and out of the room. He was panting and gasping for breath. Being president is a very hard job, he said. Who is your favorite president, Mr. Macky? Asked Andrea, who never misses the chance to brown-nose a grown-up. Said Mr. Macky, rubbing his chin where his fake beard is to be. That's a hard one. I think my favorite is Millard Fillmore. He was the 13th president. Millard Fillmore? Can you believe that? The guy's name was really Millard Fillmore. He must have been a great man. Anyone who could become president even though his name was Millard Fillmore must have been a great man. I know that if my name was Millard, kids would make fun of me all day long. I'd have to move to Antarctica. You know what I like best about Millard Fillmore? Mr. Macky asked us. His name. Then he started writing on the blackboard. Millard Fillmore, Fillard Millmore, More Mill Fillard, Lard Fillmore Mill, Mill Fill Morlard, Lard More Fill Mill. He went on and on like that until it was time for lunch. Mr. Macky is wacky. Chapter 7. I wish I had a TV in my pajamas. We went to the vomitorium for lunch. I sat with Ryan and Michael. Andrea and her annoying friend Emily were at the next table. I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Michael had a ham sandwich. Ryan had a witch sand, which is a sandwich with the meat on the outside and the bread in the middle. Ryan invented the witch sand. He should get the Nobel Prize. Which president are you gonna be for your oral report? Michael asked. I'm gonna be James Garfield, Ryan said, because I like Garfield the cat. I'm gonna be Herbert Hoover, said Michael, because he was named after a vacuum cleaner. I think the vacuum cleaner was named after him, I said. What about you, AJ? Asked Ryan. Which president are you gonna be? I don't know yet, I told the guys, but it would be cool to be president for real. Nobody can tell him what to do. I'll bet the president can stay up late even on school nights. I'll bet he can eat candy any time he wants, Ryan said, and he doesn't have to brush his teeth. I'll bet he doesn't even have to make his bed, I said, or clean up his room, or feed his fish. I'll bet he can watch TV in his pajamas all day if he feels like it, Michael said. The president has a TV in his pajamas? I asked. That's cool. I noticed that Andrea and Emily kept turning around and giggling. Girls are always giggling. Andrea and Emily were probably talking about girly stuff like smelly perfume and how many pairs of shoes they have. We boys have more important stuff to talk about, like whether or not the president has a TV in his pajamas. We ignored them. Our conversation was none of their beeswax anyway. Do you think Mr. Macky was telling the truth when he said Abraham Lincoln had to write on a shovel? I asked the guys. Lincoln should have used a computer, said Ryan. It's much easier to write on. Yeah, but you can't use a computer to dig a hole, Michael pointed out. Well, you can't check your email on a shovel, Ryan said. You could check your email if you had a shovel with a built-in computer, I told them. The lunch lady, Miss LaGrange, told us it was time to clean off our trays. Andrea and Emily walked by our table. Boys are dumbheads, Andrea said. Chapter 8. George Washington vs. Abraham Lincoln. It was the Friday before President's Day, and we were putting our stuff into our cubbies. I heard Andrea tell Emily that she was nearly finished with her President's Day oral report. She picked John F. Kennedy as our president. I bet my report is going to be the best in the whole class, Andrea whispered to Emily. Whenever we have an assignment to do, Andrea's is always the best in the class. Why does she have to be best every single time? I hate her. After we pledged the allegiance, we had to go to the all-purpose room for an assembly. Mr. Klutz was up on the stage. He's the principal of the school, and his head is completely bald. I mean completely. I wrote a poem about Mr. Klutz. It goes like this. His head is bare. It looks like a pear. His hair is not there. Where is his hair? Maybe it's in his chair. Someone should share their hair. It's not fair. But I don't care. I wish I had a chocolate eclair. Did you like my poem about Mr. Klutz's hair that he doesn't have? I tried to sound like Dr. Seuss. He was cool, even if he wasn't a real doctor. Anyway, being the principal is like being the president of elementary school. I guess every day is President's Day for Mr. Klutz. He told us he was getting excited about the big holiday on Monday. Are you going to buy a big screen TV, Mr. Klutz? Michael shouted. No, why? He asked. Because they go on sale on President's Day, Michael said. My dad is going to buy one. Mr. Klutz told us he was more interested in the presidents than big screen TVs. In honor of President's Day, Mr. Klutz announced, we're going to have you kids vote for the president of elementary school. Whoever gets the most votes will be the president when we get back to school after the holiday. That's how democracy works. Any questions? Can we vote for any president we want? One of the third graders asked. There will be 2 candidates, Mr. Klutz said. I would like to introduce them to you now. Each president will make a short speech, and then we will vote. Mr. Macky and Mrs. Rupee walked up onto the stage, dressed like Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. Everybody clapped. The presidents each took a bow. Mrs. Rupee spoke first. My name is George Washington, she said. I was the first and best president. I was the father of our country. I defeated the British in the Revolutionary War. Vote for me. Everybody clapped. Then Mr. Macky stepped forward to give his speech. My name is Abraham Lincoln. I was the 16th president. I saved the Union. I freed the slaves. I wrote the Gettysburg Address. Vote for me! Everybody clapped. Okay, said Mr. Klutz. Do either of you gentlemen have anything to add? I would just like to mention that the George Washington Bridge was named after me, said Mrs. Rupee. Well, the Lincoln Tunnel was named after me, said Mr. Macky. And Lincoln Logs, too. George Washington, Mrs. Rupee, laughed. They named some logs after you? She said. Big whoop! They put me on the dollar bill. Ooh, went all the kids. Oh yeah, said Mr. Macky. I'm on the $5 bill, so I must be 5 times better than you. Ooh, went all the kids. Abraham Lincoln totally dissed George Washington in his face. I cannot tell a lie, George Washington said. You're ugly. Ooh, went all the kids. Abraham Lincoln looked really mad. I thought the 2 of them were going to start fighting, but Mr. Klutz stepped in between them. Gentlemen, he said, there's no need to get nasty here. Remember, Benjamin Franklin is on the $100 bill. Does that mean he's better than both of you? The 2 presidents looked at Mr. Klutz. Who asked you? Said Abraham Lincoln as he shoved Mr. Klutz out of the way. Ooh, went all the kids. The George Washington Monument is way taller than the Lincoln Memorial, George Washington told Abraham Lincoln. You have wooden teeth, Abraham Lincoln told George Washington, and you probably wear that silly wig to hide your bald spot. Ooh, went all the kids. I refuse to fight, said George Washington. I am a peace-loving man. Nobody loves peace more than I do, said Abraham Lincoln. Oh, yeah? Said Washington. You want to fight over who loves peace the most? Ooh, went all the kids. Bring it on, old man, said Lincoln. I'll kick your butt. I couldn't believe Abraham Lincoln said butt. The next thing we knew, both presidents started fighting. George Washington put Abraham Lincoln in a headlock. Then Abraham Lincoln picked George Washington up over his head and started spinning him around. Soon, the 2 of them were fighting on the floor. It was cool. You should have been there. All the kids started cheering and yelling. It was just like watching professional wrestling on a big screen TV. Break it up, shouted Mr. Klutz as he separated the 2 presidents. Calm down, both of you. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Go to my office. Wow, kids get sent to the principal's office all the time. But that was the first time I ever saw a grown-up get sent there. Finally, everybody calmed down. It was time to vote for the president of elementary school. Miss Daisy and the other teachers passed out pieces of paper and pencils. We were told to write Washington or Lincoln on our paper. Whoever gets the most votes will be the president of elementary school, announced Mr. Klutz. The majority rules. That's what democracy and fair elections are all about. George Washington and Abraham Lincoln were both pretty cool guys. I couldn't make up my mind which one to vote for. That's when I got the greatest idea in the history of the world. I decided I wasn't going to vote for either of those guys. I took my piece of paper and wrote this. I vote for Mr. Wiggles. I passed my paper over to Neil the Nude Kid. Neil giggled and passed my paper over to Ryan. Ryan giggled and he passed my paper over to Michael. They passed my paper all the way down the row. So our whole class saw it. I don't know what happened to it after that, but there was a lot of giggling in the all-purpose room. If everybody is finished voting, said Mr. Klutz, please pass your papers to your teachers so they can tally up the votes. We passed our papers to Miss Daisy. She counted the votes for our class. Mrs. Patty, the school secretary, came out of the office with a calculator. Each teacher told Miss Patty how her class voted, and Mrs. Patty added up the votes. It took about 1,100,000 minutes. Finally, she handed a piece of paper to Mr. Klutz. And the president of elementary school is Mr. Wiggles? All the kids started yelling and screaming and cheering. Neil the Nude Kid's pet ferret was the new president of elementary school. Hooray for Mr. Wiggles! We all shouted. Hip hip hooray!